All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Whitney Forcell Grand Prix. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement here at UNO. I want to welcome you to our virtual webinar Wednesdays. Today, we are having Mr. Robert Baer back. He's part of our financial literacy series, and today he's going to be presenting credit reports and scores. Mr. Baer is the Vice President of Digital Marketing and Community Outreach with Fidelity Bank, and he's also a UNO alum, class of '83. He began his career in banking in 1980 when he was a junior at UNO. While his career path has not been a traditional one, taking him through the accounting, lending systems, and project management, employee development, and marketing roles at 3 local and 1 national banks, his roles have always been focused on how to make it easier for customers to manage their finances. So I want to welcome Mr. Baer, and he's part of our financial literacy series. So again, if you have anything that you would like to ask, we have a chat box that you can ask questions. Just go ahead and type your questions there, and at the end of the presentation, we'll address all questions. And welcome.
Great. So let me tell you guys a little bit about how the materials are laid out. There is a participant guide that you can download and kind of follow through. I think there are 3 or 4 activities, and the answers to the activities are also going to be in the chat box as well. So that way you can look at the activities and see if your answers were correct. This session is normally 2 hours when you do it face-to-face. So we're going to talk about the activities, and there are a couple of slides that we're just going to pass up because they're not relevant to what we're doing. So with that, I'm going to get started, and we're going to be talking about credit reports and scores. You probably want to do the survey before you do anything, because you'll be able to tell how much you've learned going through the unit when you take the survey at the end. So, so if you turn to page 3 in your participant guide, we're going to talk a little bit about what this key takeaway is for the first section, and that's how your credit history can affect your access to loans, apartments, pricing on loans. Your credit history is extremely important, so you want to make sure that you manage it just like you would your finances. Not to say that if you get into a situation that you may need a little help, that that's not available to you. But it would be best if you could manage it effectively, even when you're a student, because it does impact your access to funding and loans and those types of things. So, so if you look on page 3 of your participant guide, you'll see it. These are things that are in a credit report. So it basically includes your identifying information, who you are, where you live, your debts and some bills, any public records, and then whether or not you apply for a loan. So if you come to me and you're looking for an unsecured loan, and you've applied at 6 different places for unsecured loans that same day, or within the last week, then I'm going to kind of look at that and say, well, what would happen if you got all of those loans? Would you still be able to service the debt? Would you still, how would that impact you on a day-to-day basis? One of the things that they do when you're looking for a car loan is they don't count all of those inquiries as individual inquiries, because the car dealerships, when you apply for a car loan at the car dealership may send that application to 5 different financing arms. If it's a Ford dealership, they send it to Ford Motor Credit, and they probably have 4 or 5 banks that they deal with locally, and whoever gives the dealership the best deal is the one that ultimately gets the loan. So the bureaus do not count, when you're looking for a car, all of those inquiries as individual inquiries. They count them as one. There are basically 3 national credit reporting agencies. You can see that on the screen. What is your credit score? It's a number that talks about your ability to manage your finances, live within your means. And if you have a higher credit score, then you are going to have access to better terms when you go to get a loan, because there's less risk associated with folks that have higher credit scores than there is with folks that have lower credit scores, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Who uses credit reports? Financial institutions, landlords look at credit reports, cell phone companies look at that, employers look at social media, employers look at your credit report. So it's kind of, an image of who you are and how you manage your finances, which is really important. If you own a house and somebody wants to rent it, you want to make sure that they're taking care of the things that they need to take care of. Talked a little bit about this before with credit scores. Folks with lower credit scores having to pay higher interest rates than folks with higher credit scores. It's called risk-based pricing. So, when you look at a car loan, if you have a low credit score, you may get that car loan and you may get it for 5 years, but over the term of those 5 years, you may end up paying $3,000 or $4,000 more for that car in interest than somebody with a higher score. So it does have an impact on what you can borrow, how much you can borrow, and what type of interest rates you have as well. Conversely, not having a credit score is bad too. I think a lot of students have that. They're coming out of school, they want to get a credit card, or they're in school and they want to get a car loan, and that's when you end up having a co-signer sign on your loan for you. So the best thing to do if you're a student is to get a credit card with a low limit, and don't not use it. You want to use it, pay it back, use it, pay it back. So even if you have to pay for your groceries, you pay for your groceries, get the bill, and then pay the bill off, because you're showing a behavior of managing your credit effectively and making payments. So again, the answer wouldn't be to get that card and not use it at all, okay? This is the first activity. It's in your book on page 7. And in the answer key, there are answers to it. So we're gonna go right past that to talk a little bit about opting out. Especially when I can tell you, when you're in school, you get a lot of these pre-screened offers for credit insurance. And when you almost have your house paid off, you start getting them too. So I'm getting a whole bunch of those right now where I'm pre-qualified for credit cards and home equity loans and all of that kind of stuff. If you want to opt out because you don't want to get those, you can do that. But you can't opt out of having a credit report. Okay, so the key takeaway here is understanding your rights, making sure you understand how your credit score can affect your ability to get a job, buy a car, buy a home. So it really is something that you want to make sure you're paying attention to. Now let's talk a little bit about scores, okay? They basically come up with a number based on information that's in your credit report. It predicts the likelihood that you're going to make payments in the future. 2 things that they look at. One is whether or not you're paying stuff back, and number 2 is your credit utilization rate. So if you've got a $10,000 credit card and you're keeping that balance at about $9,500, that's going to affect your score. Your score is going to be lower than somebody that has the same credit card but has a $6,000 balance. Okay? So it's a slippery slope. They don't necessarily give out the information on how they calculate it, but at a high level, the one thing most people don't know is credit utilization and keeping a balance at a high level in relation to the limit can negatively impact your credit score. You're likely to have multiple credit scores, okay? Because different people calculate it different ways. The other thing, and this is going to come up on another slide, is there was a time where I had those free credit score services from 3 or 4 different credit cards or 3 or 4 different banks. I might have paid $15 a year for each of them, and all of them had different numbers. And I got rid of all of them because A lot of the information in there was stale. The scores weren't the same, and so you want to make sure that when you do decide to get your credit bureau, which you're allowed to get once a year, you get it from a reputable source, and we're going to go over that in a second. This is probably the mix of what goes into your credit score. So you want to pay attention to that. I'm not gonna read it all for you. You can see that. Um, if you're turned down, you do have a right to see a copy of your credit score. And that you look at your credit score, your credit report at least once a year, so that you can verify that it's got good information in it. Another thing that happens is, like, if you go to open up an account online, or you go to apply for things online, in order for those financial institutions to verify who you are, they will ask you what is called out-of-wallet questions. The reason for that is just like it sounds. If somebody steals your wallet, they have access to your driver's license, your credit card information, so they can answer questions about where you live, what your zip code is, all that kind of stuff. But they don't know that during Hurricane Katrina, you lived at your brother-in-law's house in Baton Rouge, and you had mail sent there for 6 months. So that is in my credit report, and they will ask that, you know, which of these 4 places are places that you've lived. So I used to live in an apartment. Then we moved into the house. Then we went up to his home in Baton Rouge. So, you know, all of that information, you know, what kind of cars did you buy? Which car didn't you own? You know, and they have every one of the cars that I've had. So it's really important for you to look at your credit bureau and understand what's in there, because you may get asked some out of wallet questions, and you want to make sure you remember what the answers are. Okay. So again, if you look on page 12, this is another activity. So you can go through that on your own, and the answer key is going to be there as well. Okay. What is a good credit score? And they just modified this. They upped the numbers. It used to be that the highest you would go would be about 730. And I will tell you, my son and daughter-in-law in their early 30s, and they can tell you exactly what their credit score is. They know, you know, to the number. And so you want to make sure you understand this. And again, you know, the higher the score, the greater your access to financial resources, and the lower interest rate you're typically going to pay for things. So very important to understand what your credit score is. So you want to make sure that you're paying your bills on time and as agreed, and that you know, that does affect your credit score. So let's talk about how you get your credit report and your scores. So we talked about this a little earlier. You're going to want to make sure that you review your credit score at least once a month to make sure the information is accurate. I'm sorry, once a year. And you want to make sure you have a productive credit history. So what are we talking about when we talk about that? So you can request one from each of the reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, or you can go to annualcreditreport.com. And if I'm not mistaken, the annualcreditreport.com will show them side by side, so you can kind of see what the differences are. A lot of times when maybe somebody that you have a credit card with gets hacked, you'll get a letter, and the letter will say, if you want to go verify your credit report, we'll do this for you for free. Here's where you go. This is what you do. But you are entitled to one free report a year. Anything after that, you have to pay for. But again, it is something that you want to make sure you're paying attention to. And we talked a little bit about this before as well. Everybody's going to give it to you for free until you have it for 3 months, and then they want to start charging you for it. So you want to go directly to annualcreditreport.com to get that free that free credit report. If you look on page 19 of your participant guide, it gives you some information on how you can get your credit reports, okay? Another reason that you get free credit reports is sometimes you need that if you have to verify that you need public assistance, if you're denied credit service at an apartment or employment, if you're the victim of identity theft or financial fraud. So, you know, it is something that you want to, again, be aware of, make sure you keep it close by, and be able to challenge if you think that some of the information in there isn't correct, okay? So what sections are in the credit report? You've got your personal identifying information, public records. So if you filed for bankruptcy or somebody's placed a lien on your house or somebody's placed a lien on a vehicle that you have, it's there. If that happens and you know that it's not the case, there is a process that you can go through to rectify that, because there are situations where sometimes that stuff gets posted incorrectly. Another reason why you want to look at it to make sure it's not hanging out there for a while. So this is another activity about reading a credit report. So we're going to go through that. We talked about there being 3 nationwide credit reporting agencies. You want to make sure that, you know, credit card statements and websites you can go to. Some nonprofit organizations get your credit score as well. So organizations can query the credit bureau and say, you know, give me everybody that meets this particular demographic that has a credit score between 600 and 730, and they may send you a pre-qualified visa application. Part of the reason that you're pre-qualified is because oftentimes, you know, maybe a month to a month and a half between when they pull the report and you actually get the marketing piece. If they say it's pre-approved, you're approved. Well, if you defaulted on something in that month or something bad, you know, you lost your job, that the income would go up, you know, you might not qualify. So that's why when you get those, it says you're pre-qualified, not that you're pre-approved, okay? So the key takeaway here is you want to get and review your credit reports at least once every 12 months and make sure that the information is accurate. How do you dispute errors? You go to page 32 in your participant guide. There is a way to file a dispute, but you want to make sure you're keeping records and follow-up. So, you know, if you're getting your credit card bills and you're throwing them away, probably not a good idea. The financial institution does keep electronic versions of your statements, but they don't keep them for 10 years. So, you know, make a decision on whether or not you want to keep your records in a paper format or an electronic format, so that you can go back if anything happens and challenge the charge or challenge that there is negative information in your bureau. And if you do have to send information for verification, make sure you send a copy. Don't send an original document, okay? So you want to identify errors. You want to incorrect reporting of your account status, any data management errors, any balance errors, if there's any outdated information. Do they have all of your identity information correct? Again, not that it's frequent, but these types of things do happen. So you want to make sure that you're looking at it. There is a time limit on negative information. So if you file for bankruptcy, it can only be reported for 7 years for certain types of bankruptcies. But what's really interesting is I know someone who filed bankruptcy and was having trouble getting access to credit before they filed. And after they filed, they really didn't have any trouble because I'm not sure what the limit is, but you can't file bankruptcy every year, right? I think it's probably 5 to 7 years before you can file it again. But you might not have to do that because, maybe 15 years ago, there were not organizations that focused on helping you repair your credit and those types of things. So in today's world, there are also some bankruptcies that can be reported. I'm not familiar with what they are. I have to look that up. So there are no time limits for negative information. When somebody applies for a job with a salary of $75,000 or more, if there's more than $150,000 worth of credit, and if you're buying a life insurance value with a face value of $150,000 or more. The 7 years can be confusing, but generally it starts 180 days after you stop paying the debt. So you want to make sure you're paying your stuff on time. So here's an example. On August of 2018, somebody was 30 days late. In November, they were 120 days late, and the creditor closed the account. The delinquency started in August, and July is the month before that. So you go, because that's the July payment that you missed, right? So you go from July plus 180 days, that's January of 2019, is when they would start reporting it, plus 7 years gets you to January of 2026. So after January of 2026, the account could no longer be reported. I had a money line at Capital One, an overdraft line attached to my checking account. And Capital One decided to get out of the money line business. They make more money off of credit cards. So we got a letter that said, hey, we're shutting it down. Well, I got notified that my credit report was negatively impacted based on the way that they reported the closure. So I called them and said, hey, look, you guys elected to do this. I didn't ask you to do it. So this should not negatively impact my credit score. And they said, no, the way that it worked was that they reported that it was closed, but then the next month they fixed it. And it wasn't just me, they did it to everybody whose credit line they closed. So, Fidelity has a checking account that is part of that. You get free credit monitoring. So anytime anything good or bad happens with my credit report, I get a notification on my phone, and there's a phone app, and I go in and I look at it, and 99 times out of 100, it's not that big a deal. But again, it's another thing that in today's world, they've just made it really easy for you to do that. It's the Fidelity Rewards checking account if anybody's interested. Medical debt generally does not show up on a credit report until you haven't paid it for 180 days. That gives you an opportunity to make payment arrangements, pay it off, or resolve any billing disputes. And organizations are paying less attention to medical past dues because it is so complicated. And that process, no matter how hard everybody tries, you do get into situations where it's a little difficult to take care of some of that. But as long as you're on a payment plan that the hospital or the doctor is okay with, that information will not show up in your credit report. Okay. So you can dispute errors two ways. You can go online or you can send an email. I like to go online and then I like to call people. So, but a lot of these organizations in today's world are getting really good at not giving you their phone number. So I would file online and maybe follow up with an email if they tell you to do that. So If you're going to send a dispute letter, you want to have your complete name and address, very good description of what it is you're disputing, and a request for correction or removal. What you want to make sure of is that it's a legitimate complaint. This isn't, you know, I have negative stuff in my credit bureau because I didn't pay it and I want them to take it out. Okay, because what they'll do is they'll send a notification to the financial institution saying, hey, this person is questioning this. And if it is, you know, correct information, they'll send it back and the information won't get removed out of your bureau. So this isn't a way to, get negative stuff out of your bureau, okay? If you have it, you know, if you got the receipt, you want to send copies. If you got a check, if you paid it online, you want to show in online banking where you paid it. If set up on bill pay, you want to be able to do that as well. So you get the idea. You could also request that they notify you when the corrections are done, okay? Again, something that you want to make sure you stay on top of. If you turn to page 34 in your participant guide, there's another activity. So if you want to go through that, you can, okay? The key takeaway here is if you find errors in your credit report, you want to file a dispute right away and make sure you keep records and follow up with the agency. How do you build, repair, and maintain a productive credit history? You know, this does not have to be your credit future. Your credit history does not have to be your credit future. If you've had some issues in the past and you've got them behind you, there are definitely opportunities for you to get access to the lending world to help you, you know, buy a home, buy a car, those types of things. You want to walk before you run. You know, if you've had, you know, some tough times and, you know, you don't want to go from, you know, having a bad credit to buying a $150,000 car, okay? Most importantly, and it's probably not in here, is that you want to live within your means. Okay, so the big housing bubble that happened several years ago, you know, somebody that's, you know, making $50,000 to $60,000 a year probably can't afford a house note on a $500,000 house, right? And so they signed papers, but they didn't see that the payment was low to start out with, and then 5 to 10 years in, the payments kicked up, and then they couldn't afford it. And so, not saying that that's not an adjustable rate mortgage isn't something that you may want to use, but as a long-term solution, probably not. A lot of people that do well with adjustable rate mortgages are people that work for national companies that travel around the country and they're only in one city for 2 to 3 years and then they move on to another one. So they're not looking to build equity in a home. They're looking for a nice place to live at a good price. And by the time that ARM or ARM gets ready to kick up, they're on to another place. So you just want to make sure you're aware of what you're signing and how those things work. So if you look in your participant guide on page 39, you know, there are some activities on developing a productive credit history. You can go through those on your own, okay? But if you're looking to repair and improve your credit, you want to review your credit report, dispute any errors, start paying all your bills on time. It'll show over a 24-month period whether you're paying on time or not. Back in the old days, it was a 1 and a 0. Okay, you had to go back and look at it when I worked in lending. Now, green means you paid when you were supposed to, and red means you didn't. Okay, use as little of your credit limit as possible. Create a credit building strategy. So I'm going to have a credit card with a low limit for 6 months. Then I'm going to ask them to raise my limit, you know, Then I'm going to get a car loan. So when you start showing, hey, look, I had this bad situation in the past, and now I'm doing better, that's what folks need. You want to apply for credit only if you need it, and try and negotiate different terms. You can do that a lot with interest rates. If you feel like your interest rate is too high, excuse me. I used to do that with Cox Cable all the time. Whenever they were getting new clients in and they were giving away modems, a better service, I would call them up and say, look, you're giving this stuff away. I've been having an account with y'all for 15 years. I should get the same thing that they do. Same thing happens when you go to Disney. If you call Disney and you're trying to make reservations, they can't tell you about any of the specials that they're running. So the first thing I do when I call is I say, tell me about the specials you're running. Then they have to tell you, okay? So it's okay to ask for goodwill deletion. It's okay to ask to negotiate, a lower rate. The least they can do is tell you no. So, manage your credit effectively, all right? You also, if you can, build an alternate credit history, who you're paying rent to, who you're paying childcare to. You can read all of these. And if you're paying all of that stuff on time and you don't have any past dues, then you can use that when you're, if you don't have any credit when you're going to get your first car or whatnot. Okay. You can get a secured credit card. So you put $500 on deposit with the bank. They give you a $500 limit credit card. And, it's secured because you're never going to go above $500. If you don't pay it, they're going to take the money out of your savings account. There are credit building loans. You want to be an authorized user on an account if you can. Get a gas card and show that you're paying that. Put a large down payment down when you're on a car, so the loan is smaller. Again, a lot of options for building your credit, okay? And here are some examples of each one of those and whether or not you think they would work for you if you turn to page 42 in your participant guide, okay? Good little worksheet there, okay? The most important thing is that if you have credit, that you want to pay your bills on time, pay down your balances, make sure that the limits, the balances are lower than what the limits are. If you want to keep them between 60 and 70%, that's a good thing. Make sure you don't have 6 credit cards in your wallet. Avoid actions or inactions that would cause negative information to get into your bureau. Pay your taxes and child support on time. Check your credit report and keep good financial records. It's one of those things where you don't really think about it until you need it. So you don't want to be looking around for this if you've got to go talk to somebody about some negative information in your credit bureau. If you need help, there are any number of organizations, whether they be banks, whether they be nonprofit organizations, that are going to help you repair your credit. But this isn't one of those things where you go to them and they take care of it for you. You have got to be invested or committed to improving your credit. One of the stories that I use when you're trying to find out if somebody's committed, I use an analogy where I talk about breakfast. And people kind of look at me and say, what does that have to do with this? I said, well, who's more committed to breakfast, the chicken or the pig? And they kind of look and I say, well, the chicken's involved, right? The chicken's got to lay the egg. The pig's committed. If you're having ham or bacon, the pig's got to die, right? So how committed are you to managing your credit? You need to be committed. You don't need to be involved. This isn't, let me give this to somebody else and let them take care of it for me, okay? So you want to make sure that you talk to the right people. And in some of these situations, check the non-banks out with the Better Business Bureau, because as in anything, there are folks that are going to take advantage of you. And if folks are telling you they want to help you fix your credit, and in order to do that, you have to pay them $1,000. That's probably not somebody that you want to work with helping rebuild your credit. You want to look them up with the Better Business Bureau and find somebody that's going to be more amenable to helping you. Okay. So again, you can go to a financial institution, nonprofit counseling service, a certified financial planner, housing counseling agencies normally approved by HUD. You kind of get the idea. There are lots of places you can go to fix your credit. But again, this is ultimately something that you're going to need to be able to do and be committed to. Okay. Credit repair companies promise to fix your credit for a fee. I don't know too much about that. And then debt consolidation businesses, you want to be real careful with that, because all they're doing is taking all your credit from one other place and moving it to their place. And the interest rate might look better and the payment might look better, but if you have a $300 payment and you're paying it off in 4 years, and then you have a $250 payment, but you're paying it off in 10 years, you're paying a whole lot more for that $250 payment, right? So again, you want to make sure you read everything. You want to make sure you understand what you're committing to, and don't sign anything until you are 100% sure that it's what you want to do. Okay. What a debt consolidation is, we talked about, is you have 3 credit cards and an unsecured loan, and you combine them and then you have one payment. Debt settlement is where these organizations go to companies and ask them to take less than what you owe. So you owe $3,000 on a credit card, and they'll get so that you only have to pay them 2. Well, that institution may put a negative record in your credit bureau because of that $1,000. They'd rather get the 2, but they're still going to identify that you owed them 3 and you only paid 2. So you want to make sure you know what you're getting into when you're doing that. You can read this, and we talked a little bit about it. If they won't be honest with you and won't tell you your rights, you want to stay away. If they want you to pay them up front, if they're promising you the moon, bottom line is if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to that. You want to make sure that an initial fraud alert lets you know that somebody is using your information. There are active duty military alerts. An extended fraud alert we talked about a little earlier, about somebody got a hold of your information. A credit freeze is when they say you can't use the account for a while until you bring it back current. And a credit lock means we're just locking this. You don't have access to the funds anymore. So you have 2 types of loans. You have revolving loans and you have term loans. Term loans, you get all the money up front and then you pay it off. Revolving loans, you have a limit. You may borrow up to that limit, pay it down, go up, go down. When they freeze it and lock it, it means if you had $1,000 available on a credit line, you don't have access to it anymore. Whether that be an unsecured, whether it be an equity line or a personal line, or so when Capital One froze their accounts, I still owed them the money, but I didn't have access to the unused portion, which some people use credit lines as a way to they may get big bonuses every quarter, so they use a credit line to help them with monthly expenses and then pay it off when they get their bonuses. So that's just one way to do that. So remember, your credit history does not have to be your credit future. All right. So if you go to page 54, you got to put a plan together, and that's what that information is all about. The only person who is 100% invested in your plan is you. So you want to make sure you put it together and you put something in place that you can manage. Okay. There's also a post-training survey. So if you take that and you compare your answers from the beginning survey to this survey, you kind of get an idea, 50,000 feet, what you learned by coming through the presentation. And that's it. Let's see if we have any questions, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks very much, Robert. I've got one question here. I see companies that advertise they can help fix or clean your credit. Do these companies really work to fix credit scores?
More times than not, no. If you want to fix your credit score, what you need to do is talk to the financial institutions that you have relationships with and the credit reporting agencies. It could be something really easy that you can take care of by yourself, but they want to charge you a fee to do it. And so, you know, if I have never used one of those, I would say work with the organization that you borrowed the money from and the credit reporting agency to fix that. Excuse me.
Thanks very much, Robert. Are there any more written questions? All right, looks like that's it for written questions. Oh, hang on 1 second. Go on. Okay. See. Hang on, I'm just waiting on a question, I think. Is it true if someone adds to their credit account or credit card account?
Yeah, so you can have my brother-in-law has a Southwest Rewards card. He's on it, his wife's on it, and all three of his kids are on it. So everybody's got their own card. Now, it's not for everybody to go out to dinner and all that, but it's if they're, you know, if they're somewhere and there's an emergency and they need to buy tires or they need to get their car fixed, you know, it's a great way to have access to money without having to walk around with a whole bunch of cash. You know, I have a sister who co-signed on her son and daughter-in-law's first home. Okay, so if you have a co-signer, more times than not, if you're looking to establish credit, you may not qualify for a credit card, but because the individual who's going to co-sign with you has really good credit, they'll put them on the card with you. And in effect, if you don't pay it, that individual is going to be responsible for paying it. So that happened to my brother. My brother has a really big heart, and he had a couple of people that worked for him that asked him to co-sign for loans for them. And about a year into a 3-year loan, they bugged out, and he ended up having to pay the loan off for him. So parents co-sign for kids when they're trying to establish credit. Parents co-sign for kids when they're trying to buy their first house, and maybe the numbers don't look right from a debt to income, and maybe somebody's working for cash and all of that stuff. You know, a lady that works with my wife, her husband's a bartender and at Lafitte's. And if you look at his W-2, that is not what he's bringing home. Okay, but financial institutions look at what you report on your tax return and what your W-2 says. So you can't go in and tell them, look, I bring home $80,000 a year more in cash. You know, that doesn't mean anything. But if you can go in and say, you know, look, I've got an 870 credit score or a 770 credit score, you know, and everything else in my bureau is clean, you know, then you kind of get a little, leeway. The other question was, does his score boost their score? It's not that his score will boost their score, but showing that they're managing the credit effectively will cause the score to go up. And so, you know, I don't know if I have told you guys this before, but when my son was in high school, I got him a checking account, and I was a co-signer on the checking account. The primary reason for that was I got tired of him going to dances with kids whose parents made 3 times as much money as me, and those kids didn't have money to pay for their meals. Okay, so when he would go to a dance, when he would go to, you know, when he went to LSU, that's how I got him money. You know, I paid his rent, I paid his phone bill and all of that, but his spending money, I just transferred it into the account. He still has that account and I'm still a signer on it. Okay. I don't put money in it and I don't look at what he's doing with it. So it's a way for the bank to manage risk when someone that doesn't have a credit report or has negative information in their credit report. It allows the bank to extend credit while mitigating the risk associated with that credit. Does that make sense? And over time, if it's paid as agreed, the scores will go up.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Just another question. This one's actually from me. If you have a lot of different credit cards and you have a very high overall limit, and you're utilizing them pretty well and paying off the balances and everything like that by the end of the month, but you don't have any other forms of credit like a loan or anything like that, does that impede the growth of your score if you're not using different types of credit as opposed to just using credit cards with revolving credit?
You know, I think if you have credit cards, I don't think that it impedes it, but it does. They do want to see that you're using various forms of credit, you know? So what they'll do with the credit cards is one of the things they look at is how long has it been open? You know, so let's say you had 3 credit cards and you're like, look, I don't need all of this. What am I going to do? You're probably assuming the terms are good. You probably want to keep the one that's been open the longest because that's what they look at. How long has this person had a credit history? And are they using the credit effectively, right? But overall, I think they having too many credit cards that have available credit, the bank looks at it. What would happen to his ability to repay if he had full balances on all of these? So they kind of factor that into what they do is your debt to income ratio, right? They look at how much money do you make? What kind of payments do you have? Do you have the ability to pay this based on your current debt to income ratio, right? And if you have a bunch of credit cards that have available credit on it, one of the numbers they'll look at is what would their debt to income ratio be if all of these cards got charged up to the limit? So, you know, on the one hand, it's good to establish credit. On the other hand, you know, you'd probably be better off if you had fewer, if that makes sense. I wish I could give you direct answers, but it's all so, you know, you kind of get in the circle, but you don't know exactly how all of it works.
That's great. Thank you. I think that's it for questions. So I will hand it back over to the folks at UNO.
Great.
Hi. I want to thank everybody for attending this webinar. This was very, very informative. I want to remind you that we do have the handouts posted on our UNO virtual events page, which is www.unoalumni.com/virtual events. We will be sending out a survey just so that you can let us know how you liked this particular session in our financial planning series, and also for you to let us know what other information you would like us to present on. I want to thank Mr. Bear again for a very, very informative session. I learned a lot. I hope you did. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.